Hello and welcome to another Let's Play Planet Zoo. My name is Chris, and this is episode 28? I believe it's 28. I should have checked before I started recording. If it's not episode 28, I'll correct myself here in a little bit. We're trying a new format to these videos. So, I've been looking at the metrics on YouTube, and I have noticed that the... sorry, I'm a little distracted. There's warthogs floating on the grass over here. But anyway, we're just gonna look over here instead. Ignore that little bug there. Anyway, so I've been looking at the metrics on YouTube, and it seems like most people only watch about 15 minutes of my video. So I'm gonna try a different format rather than a near hour-long speed build. Where it also looks like people just kind of like scrub through the speed build. They don't actually watch the whole thing, you know, from start to end. Excuse me. It's spring. Allergies are starting to get to my throat. Benefit for you is I will have a much more deeper and sexier voice in the months to come. Unfortunately for me, that means I have no use of my nose for the next coming months. But anyway, without any more distractions, hopefully, like I said, I've been looking through the metrics on my video, and it seems like most people only watch about 15 minutes, and most people kind of like jump through the time lapse. They'll watch the intro, they'll watch a little bit in the middle, they'll watch a little bit here and there, and then they'll jump to the cinematic. So what I'm going to try to do instead is, rather than having a near hour long speed build, I'm going to do kind of update narrations. So, for example, like right here, if you remember watching our last video, we were talking about building out our African savanna exhibit. So I've got the first little chunk of it done. Like very, very little chunk, which is this kind of dry riverbed that kind of weaves down our mountain up over here. This is mostly for our antelope and our gazelle and our, I believe the warthogs use it. I think the ostriches can get in here because there's one right over there. I believe the zebras can get in here, but like the elephants and the giraffes, they don't seem to want to be down here. There's another flying another flying warthog. Might have to address that. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to give more kind of like progress update videos. So I'm just going to kind of narrate like what I've done. So we've got this little dry riverbed here. The idea behind it was that, you know, during the heavy raining season, water's going to come down this mountain here, and it's kind of rush down this riverbed, and they'll have like a little series of falls. There'll be a little series of rapids, you know, as the river kind of just comes rushing down here during the wet season. But for the most part, you know, except again during the wet season, this is just going to be kind of a dry riverbed. So you'll have a lot of kind of growth and vegetation, with the exception of where the water will traditionally flow. So like right down here in the middle, and these warthogs, man, they just do whatever they want. But anyway, like the riverbed itself, I imagine is going to be kind of rocky. It's going to be kind of you know, a lot of the nutrients and stuff would have been stripped away from the rains, so there's not going to be a whole lot growing there. So you're going to have grasses kind of growing right up next to it. And it's going to, in my mind, going to be very, very lush kind of around the riverbed. At least here in the Midwest, when we have one of these, whoops, wrong way. When we have one of these dry riverbeds, you have, you know, some small trees that kind of grow up next to it. You know, they kind of trap the water in. They get enough nutrients during the wet season to kind of grow, but since they're not getting constant rain, you know, it's mostly dry, you know, their growth is kind of stunted. So you have a lot of kind of small trees, you know, punctuated here and there by a lot of, you know, kind of fast growing tall grasses. And I mixed two grasses here. I mixed the common reeds, which are the ones with the little fuzzies on the top, with the elephant grass. And I sunk a lot of the elephant grass down into the ground. And the common reeds I kind of put in the taller, denser areas to make it look like that grass has matured. You know, it's now seeding. It's gonna, you know, start. I wish we had, you know, like a bug effect where we could have, you know, bugs kind of going up. I should probably put that in, you know, between now and the other video. So I'll put in some of those. I believe they're the dandelions. You know, put them upside down so it looks like there's bugs kind of hopping in and out of the grass, because that's what would be going on right now. I really like how this little creek turned out. I love it during the sunsets and sunrises. You know, you get these long shadows kind of going into it and kind of highlighting off the rocks, and we'll give that gazelle a little privacy. We'll focus on this guy. He's looking a lot more majestic than a pooping gazelle down there. And look at him. Oh, look at that. He's showing off for the camera. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to design it for. I wanted to have a bunch of animals kind of running up and down this little creek, like stair steps up the mountain. So I believe it's conquered its purpose. So I put a lot of the little gazelle enrichment items through here. You've got, you know, a feeder down here. We've got a couple of the herb marked, or the herb scented markers, I believe is what they're called. So the next part of the zoo we're going to conquer here, and let me quickly turn off the Ansel effect here. Whoops, that closed the game. Hopefully that did not break my recording. Okay. I think we're okay. This is what happens when you do live demos. I know this very well from the software world. You never try to do live demos. Anyway, so I think we're going to continue expanding north through the exhibit. So the next part will be kind of down here. Did my game crash? Nope. Okay. It paused there for a second. I don't know if that's actually going to be in the recording. But let me also kind of hop through here and turn the sunlight back on so we can actually see what I'm talking about. So anyway, I'm going to continue kind of wrapping around this mountain here. You see a lot of animals aren't quite going up that direction yet. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to get the mouse here so you can draw it out here. So from the corner of the elephant grass here, I'm going to kind of swing on around and kind of end up over here. I kind of also imagine maybe another small creek coming off. You can see where I've kind of carved out a little bit of the terrain. Another little small creek coming off of there. Maybe some rock creek feature here, you know, as the water would rush this way off the mountain, and it would kind of pool up here, come down off the cliff face, and then either run left or right. So I think that'll be another feature, and then that should kind of wrap it up for this little side of the mountain. So I'm going to get to building, and I will see you guys in just a second with the completed product. Be right back. I wanted to talk about something here, real pointers about how to do at least decent rock work. So I've seen a lot on about how to do at least decent rock work. So I've seen a lot on the workshop where you have rocks, and I'll quickly recreate it here. You know, you'll have a little rock something, and it's just a whole bunch of rocks kind of piled on top of each other, basically to fill mass with no real rhyme or reason as to why those. I'm going to get rid of this one because that one just is a little ridiculous. But with no real kind of rhyme or reason as to why those rocks are stacked that way. You know, there's a bunch of rocks kind of piled up. One thing, if you are having issue with or not really having an issue, but if you are struggling with making realistic looking rock formations, so we've got this formation here, you know, and you can kind of imagine how the water runs. You've got the water that comes down here on the right side where this little antelope guy's going, and then you'd have water that would come down on the left side. Now, one thing about rock is that it is in layers. You can kind of imagine it like a cake. You know, you've got no matter where you cut in the cake, there's going to be a layer at a certain depth. So if we look at our waterfall here, we've got the rock over here on the left and the rock over here on the right. They're at the same layer. You can move these guys just to kind of prove the point. So I'm going to put it on the world axis. So if I move him over here, he intersects there. So that adds to realism because the rocks are again going to be all layered. So there's going to be different stratas in the rock depending on where you are, and that strata will always kind of go in the same relative depth. So to make your rocks a little more realistic in Planet Zoo, let me grab a couple of rocks here, is that when you're placing them, if you keep it in mind that all the rocks are on the same strata, you can kind of picture horizontal lines that are going to start emerging in your rock formation. And if you kind of follow those horizontal lines, you get to mimic the strata and it looks more realistic overall. So I'm actually going to grab a arch shape here. I'm going to grab a flat one. This guy will work. I'm just going to kind of plop him here. Get them lined up with our, go back to relative axis here. Get them kind of lined up with our strata. And it's not like a hard and fast rule, you know, obviously nature doesn't draw straight lines, but if I kind of move this across here, and let me pull it out so you can actually see it. If I kind of move it across, for the most part, things are following a straight line. Now, if I go to my terrain, you see how my terrain kind of slopes up, so that's kind of how I want the stratas of rock to look, because either the rocks, you know, fell down on top of each other in the case of like an old mountain range, you know, collapsing, eroding, or the rocks, you know, were pushed up by something. You're going to have ripples in your strata that kind of follow along with the terrain. So let me fix this a little bit. So we can kind of follow our straight line, and it kind of mimics the hump of the terrain here. Now, why am I saying this? Well, in Planet Zoo, there's a lot of these little kind of nooks and crannies in the rock. You know, you've got these little these little edges, these little lines, and if you line those up, you know, you can now continue to sell your strata. If you want to have a break in your rocks, make sure it's kind of all on the same strata, and then you kind of continue the line out. So we've got the break in our rocks here, and they kind of continue out in the break. We've got our break in the rocks between where the water comes down, and again, it kind of follows between these two guys are similar. Now, for blending rocks, one trick I've noticed, so let me go back to our rocks here. So I'm going to grab, we'll grab this guy. So for blending rocks, I'm going to put this guy in, you know, lower him down, kind of again following our imaginary line here. I'll put him back on his relative axis so I can move him a little bit more. There we go. So let's do something like that. So one thing I like to do with blending rocks is wherever there's any of these little details, I'm going to pull the rock out here, so like this little kind of indentation or whatever that's supposed to be, that darker spot on the rock, I don't like to clip it like that, because now I notice that there's something, you know, a little bit wrong. I mean, from a distance you don't notice, but when you're up close you do notice that there is a kind of like texture, a seam in the texture. So what I like to do is either I like to, you know, push them in so they're not showing as much or I'll try to find a dark spot on the other rock and kind of line that up so that it looks like it's a continuation from one rock to the other, and it kind of helps sell that this is one large rock rather than a whole bunch of rocks stacked on top of each other. Now, if you still have a little bit of a seam like we do here, I'm going to pause the game so we don't keep getting that lag every time it tries to recalculate the paths. So like right here, we have a little bit of a seam that is noticeable. So what I like to do in that case is I'll grab one of the cladding pieces and I'll rotate it onto its side. And I'll try to sink it in. And usually there's a side that's better than others. So we'll grab this one here because I like how it kind of slopes upwards. I'm just going to kind of tuck him in a little bit to make it look like or make it less noticeable that there's a seam. I'm going to pull him down actually. Do that, and then I'll grab another piece. These small pieces are really good at masking the seams between the rocks. So I'm going to kind of rotate him. Just going to kind of hide that dark spot down here in the lower part of this rock. So now from the distance, that looks a little bit better than if we just had, those two guys. You can notice that there is a seam there, especially when you know when to look for it. So from a distance, again, it doesn't look so bad. And again, you just kind of keep working at it. Some rocks look better next to each other than others. I'm going to drop another one down here. So these two guys, I tend to like and put them next to each other because they both have, at the top, a nice little set of crevices. So I'm just going to kind of line them up again, sink them in. Again, kind of trying to follow our imaginary line up through the terrain. And I'm just going to tuck him in. Then I'm going to blend him a little bit more. And we're just going to grab, I think the underside of this one looks pretty good. Rock work is somewhat tedious. It's definitely a way you can waste a whole lot of time. One other thing, as the water comes flowing through here, you're gonna get kind of a concave shape to your rock formation. So there's gonna always be, during the rainy season, water at a certain water line, and that will erode the rocks faster than the water. If the water's getting up to here, I mean, something's pretty wrong, because there's not a whole lot for it to move. So you'll have rocks kind of collapsing and sloping down, which will kind of give you a little bit of a concave feel. So the rocks down here should be a little bit more U-shaped. You've got your kind of U that comes down in and around. Same thing with like waterfalls. Water doesn't just roll off a flat rock. There is a little bit of a U shape in there, especially for ones that aren't flowing all the time. So as this rock dries out, it's going to crack. The next rainy season comes through, it's going to move away all those looser pieces on this rock face, and it's just going to kind of keep chipping away at it with each passing season. So what you'll end up with is kind of a U-shaped ravine, throughout, like over here. So hopefully that helps you a little bit in your rock building. Then we're just kind of keep a level line going, and then if you need like extra strata, like for up here, we're getting kind of close. So what we do, at least what I like to do, let me grab another rock piece, because I've got like 2 of them stacked there. We'll grab this one. So I like to make some sort of definition between the two, either like a ledge, or another thing I like to do is I'll grab a rock of similar but slightly different color. So if I grab maybe like this desert one, it's going to be kind of hard to see. Let's see. One thing I do wish is I wish we had more rocks. Well, let's say maybe there's like a layer of like granite or something. This is kind of a granite looking rock, but you can kind of put a layer in there that helps delineate between, you know, different layers in your own rock. You know, just kind of add a little bit more realism or fun to your build. Another thing, like if you want to convey that maybe it's a little muddy down here, maybe put a darker rock down here. You know, rocks tend to darken when they get wet, so if I put a darker rock than what I have down here, it can convey, especially if I have water rushing through here, that these rocks are wet, these rocks are dry. Again, adding a little bit more to that realism in your nature scenes. Now for lower parts in your rock area, it's going to tend to be a little bit more bouldery, a lot more dirt. You know, this is where all the sediment, all the rocks and everything kind of collect. So what I like to do is I like to just kind of sink in a whole bunch of large rocks, barely letting their tops kind of poke out, and that kind of sells the effect of some smaller boulders. At least it sells it a whole lot better than the terrain paint. So then you get your kind of nice stream bed starting to take shape, and you can easily visualize where the water is going and where it's coming from. So just a little pointer there, just a little tidbit. I'm gonna keep working on the exhibit here and show you guys, hopefully here in a little bit, what the, well, for you it'll be instant, for me it'll be a little bit. But anyway, in the next break it'll be the or maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, before this video is out, you will see the completed rock work here and completed riverbed work here, so stay tuned. So we've been continuing making progress on our Savannah exhibit here. We've got the cliff face just about wrapped up here. So we got our dry creek down here. We can kind of come up this way, go through this little kind of cliff, coming out over to the eventually this cliff will extend out a little further, but you know, you're coming out through the cliff face, coming out down here, and then our actual active river down here. Let me change the camera. And then we'll have our waterfall. Just kind of have that, for the most part, mapped out, or I guess really not mapped out. What's a good word for that? Mapped out, I think, works, but laid out? Let's go with laid out. Laid out sounds better. So we've got the rock work kind of all done on that for the most part. Still kind of have to do the back area there. Then do a little bit more rock work kind of following through the canyon. I think I'm going to continue the style of this rock work through the canyon and then kind of taper off as we come out here, which I'm kind of imagining more of a floodplains. So this is going to be a little bit more marshy, a little bit more, probably a little bit more muddy, grassy, you know, like little islands of grass in like the high spots, but for the most part, pretty marshy throughout here. I also went ahead and got the land bridge built out. So now the animals can walk across the water here, up this hill, coming back around and going across this land bridge to get to the back side of the exhibit over here, which again, I'm going to kind of in this little nook and cranny tuck in some of the hard shelter back here. So it's getting there. Probably the most I'm going to be able to do for now. I'll start working on the marshlands next, this kind of lower area. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing. Let me hop over here. So I had an idea of creating these like little, almost want to call them like blinds. If you ever are familiar with that term, basically a place where you can go sit and look in and the animal's not going to know you're there. So I've created this little blind here for the warthogs. I put their little mud bath down here. And then on the other side, we've got our view into it, which will be, you know, a little enclosure here. I plan on bringing the path out. Keep zooming out. So bring the path down this way. I'm thinking of putting maybe a row of guest facilities. I don't know if it's going to be shops or just bathroom or like a gift stall or something. Kind of putting that over here in this corner. It's a little tight, so I'm not 100% sure I'm going to do that. I think I'll just maybe have a little observation area and maybe a bathroom over here. Called like the warthog hide or something, or the hog hide. That sounds pretty good. So you can come down here and see the, get a nice view kind of up through the dry creek. You'd see the warthogs down here playing in their mud pool. At least that's the theory anyway. There's a little bit of modifications I have to do. I don't think some of the animals can get back up here anymore since I built this little ravine. I think their pathfinding kind of broke. I'm actually going to hit play for a second. There we go. Maybe. It's coming back to life. All right, we're good. So yeah, that's pretty much where I think we're going to leave off this episode. We've completed the hill here. I'm going to do some cinematics. I really like how it came out. I think it looks pretty good. It's definitely a good start to this exhibit, I feel. We're going to obviously have a lot more going on with this exhibit. Definitely want to get the animals to kind of move a little bit further out from these right here in the front. I want them to kind of explore the whole area, especially I've got a couple of like the gazelle going up there now, which is kind of nice to see them up here, interacting with the environment. We got an ostrich back here too, apparently. But yeah, it's definitely working out good. I've got the let me change the sun position so you can see. Actually, you can see it right now. I've got the upside down dandelion seeds going, so you can kind of pretend that they're bugs kind of flying around through the grasses. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. There you go. When they're in the sun, they kind of glow a little bit better. So we'll close out with some cinematics here, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Oh, let me know what you guys think of this format, if you like it or don't like it. If you want to go back to me doing speed builds, or if you prefer this format. Love to hear from you. Statistically, I think this format's going to be better, but I don't know. I'm new to the YouTube. I have no idea what's better or what's worse. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of this kind of format. If you like the speed builds, or if you want the kind of progress cut and paste style video that we have now, I'd love to hear it. So that's all right. I'll roll these cinematics, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Take care.